All right. Does everybody remember these? Right? These old, clunky flip phones that we all had way back in the day. If I had told you in 2010 that by 2020 you'd be using this phone in virtually every aspect of your life, whether it is booking an appointment, making money transfers between bank accounts, ordering a flight, editing a video, you probably would not have believed me. Well, now we have this, a smartphone that can do all of those things and so much more, to the point that a lot of us treat this device like an extension of our person. And we're in a similar situation right now with generative AI, where generative AI represents much more than a simple trend, but a huge disruptor that is going to fundamentally change the very nature of the software market. And it's one that you need to be prepared for. Now, by 2028, Gartner is predicting that about 95% of organizations will have integrated generative AI into their daily operations. And this is up from 15% in 2025. So from 15% to 95%. This is a huge jump. And this represents dedicated generative AI investments within the organization, across industries, business roles, use cases, departments. And so this is a very important area to be aware of. In fact, by 2024, or in 2024, business leaders reported that about 6.5% of their functional budget was being dedicated to generative AI. And what you'll notice here is not only is this a sizable investment for an emerging technology, but this wasn't limited to a few departments. As you can see on the screen here, the spending was done throughout the organization. And this is because generative AI has broad utility within your company. Now, these investment numbers are going to increase. The use of generative AI within the organization is going to increase. And the utility of generative AI is going to increase, particularly as the technology becomes more mature. So if you want to capitalize on this innovation and the opportunity that it represents for your organization, there's 3 things that you need to know. First is where generative AI works today and what you should be doing about it. Second is where generative AI will soon work and how you should prepare for this. And third is where generative AI might never work and how you should avoid those pitfalls. So first, let's look at where generative AI currently works today. Now, the Emerging Tech and Trends team here at Gartner has analyzed hundreds and hundreds of GenAI case studies to reveal these as the most popular. So we've got marketing customization, operations optimization, customer service support, knowledge management, and software development. Now, further analysis of these cases revealed that about half of them are delivering medium impact, which means they're having minimal change to the processes within the organization, and they're delivering incremental versus transformational value. Now, a vast majority of these also represented simple or very simple deployments, which means they weren't technically complex, they are not particularly expensive, and they are generally lower risk. So this right here is where the market is currently focused, around GenAI use cases that are delivering medium impact and that represent simple deployments. So with that in mind, we're quickly going to run through some of the top 3 examples and look at examples of this value delivery in the market. So first up, we have marketing. Now, currently, the market is focused on scale. And in this example, we have a Fortune 50 automaker that is using typeface in order to launch an advertising campaign by using generative AI to create hundreds and hundreds of images. And as you can see by the numbers on the screen here, they were able to achieve significant scale in content production. But what's more interesting is where generative AI is headed next, which is more so a focus on performance. And here we have a top athletic retailer that used Jasper AI in order to generate accurate, engaging, brand-aligned product descriptions. And they created thousands of these descriptions and were able to realize an increase in inefficiencies within the agency review and quality assurance process. And I think this is a great example because it demonstrates that generative AI is not about creating more and more and more content, but it's about creating branded quality content that is performant. And this is increasingly where the market is focused. Now, next we have operations optimization. And what's interesting about this example is it demonstrates how a seemingly basic, widely deployed use case in the market can scale both in its technical complexity as well as its value delivery. And in this example, we have a healthcare organization that used generative AI in order to boost clinician productivity. And they achieved this by using it to summarize patient notes, generate referral letters, and retrieve medical information. So summarization, generation, retrieval. These are all very common uses of generative AI. But what's interesting is that they then scaled it to more complex operations within the organization. And they used generative AI to improve patient discharge management by predicting the length of a patient's stay. And they used it to improve patient outcomes by predicting the likelihood of them developing some riskier healthcare conditions. And I think this is a great example because it demonstrates how a run-of-the-mill use case that everybody is doing right now can really scale to tackle some more complex operations and essentially evolve into a high-impact use case. So this is a flag for you all to start thinking about what are the second-order results that you could be achieving with your generative AI use cases. Next, we have customer support. And in this example, there is a global travel alliance that developed a booking agent using Elemental Cognition's generative AI platform. And this booking agent was designed to support complex, multi-hop travel itineraries using customer preferences. Now, prior to generative AI, this organization struggled with really high call center volumes. But using generative AI, they were able to create and scale an entirely new booking agent that was able to increase the number of valid user bookings by 10 times. And I think this is a great example because customer support represents a massive area of opportunity for you all. And using generative AI, you can go above and beyond simply reducing call center volumes or supporting very basic Q&A. And you can start using generative AI to tackle some more complex operations and some more advanced use cases within the organization. And in some cases, deliver entirely new value outcomes, like this organization did here. So this brings us back to the original question, where does generative AI currently work? Well, it works here, at the intersection of low risk, medium value, and high feasibility. The current market focus is here. This is where there are the most commonly successful examples of generative AI use cases within the market. And this is where you should be focusing your current generative AI applications, on use cases that are lower risk, that are generally feasible to implement and maintain, and that most importantly, deliver quantifiable value, especially for your organization. So now that we know where generative AI currently works, let's move the clock forward in time and consider, where will generative AI soon work? Now, the virtual assistant market has significantly changed over the past 5 years, and generative AI has played a critical role in this evolution, particularly in the advancement from virtual assistants to advanced virtual assistants, and now with the emergence of AI agents. And what's more is that the rate of change is not slowing down. And as you can see here on the screen with this conversational AI impact radar, there is a lot of technological innovation that is coming down the pipeline over the next few years. But today we're going to focus on the most critically important technologies that you all need to know about that are going to be shaping the future of generative AI. And the future of generative AI is domain specialized, it is multimodal, and it is agentic. And what this means is that where generative AI works today is going to significantly change in the coming years. And what you see on the screen here is a scaled-down version of that impact radar. And there's two ways to read the impact radar. So the first is by range. So we've got the center at early majority customer adoption, and then we have 1 to 3 years until early majority, and then we have 3 to 6, and then 6 to 8. Now the second way you read the impact radar is by mass. And this considers how many use cases or industries or business roles does the technology materially impact, as well as whether or not it adds new features or functionality that just simply wasn't there before. And what you'll notice is that all three of these technologies are rated as having very high mass, which means we think they're going to have a transformational impact on the market. And this transformational impact is going to enable generative AI applications to support multimodal tasks, to solve industry-specific problems, and to provide new task automation. And what this means is that future use cases are going to develop and evolve around these three emerging technologies. So let's take a look at these three technologies and some example case studies. So first up, we have domain specialized language models, or DSLMs. And DSLMs are the future of generative AI, not large language models. So what is a DSLM and why is it better? Well, domain specialized language models are trained on domain-specific data, and they're designed to support a particular knowledge area. And this could be an industry domain, it could be a functional domain, or it could be a use case. And what this is going to enable is an explosion of new and specialized applications that are wrapping around the workflows and business processes within the organization. And because DSLMs are domain specialized, they're more accurate and therefore more performant than their large language model counterparts. DSLMs are also going to be fit for purpose, which means they're likely going to trend smaller, which immediately unlocks latency and cost benefits for you all, but also will create some unexplored edge opportunities. So for example, what if you could run your domain-specialized generative AI applications on a laptop or a smartphone? Now, in addition to this, DSLMs are also likely going to be multimodal. And multimodality and domain specialization are going to evolve hand in hand in the coming years. And this is because DSLMs will likely be designed to support the primary data modalities for the industries that they were created. So for example, if you have a healthcare model, that being able to interact with text and voice and healthcare images, versus the primary data types in financial services versus marketing and sales. And multimodality is essentially the ability to interact with 2 or more data types. And this could be touch, it could be voice, it could be maps and video and charts and graphs. But the reality is that the future of all software is going to be multimodal. And what this means is that how you interact with your generative AI applications is going to significantly change in the coming years. Now, what you see on the screen here is an illustration of that. Multimodality is going to enable new capabilities and therefore new use case opportunities for you all. And as you can see with this graphic, we're expecting multimodality to absolutely explode in the coming years. Now, currently, we estimate that about 50% of tech products are multimodal, which is virtually going to become 100% by 2030. And in addition to this, and what's more important for you all to understand, is that multimodality is going to increase your AI automation potential by up to 50%. And this is because it will enable new features and functionality, it will support new use cases, and it will provide new automation that simply wasn't there before. So it's a very important technology that we all need to be aware of. But let's take a look at how this works in reality. So in this example, we have a Canadian wealth management team that is piloting the use of domain-specialized multimodal offerings from Kore.ai. And these models are specialized to the finance industry, as well as particular tasks, and they are capable of both ingesting as well as generating text and tables and increasingly charts and graphs. And what this is doing is it is reducing the amount of manual work that's having to be performed by the equity and stock research team by using generative AI to conduct research and generate reports. Now, thus far, they estimate about an 80% in time savings, and this has taken report creation from days to only a few hours. And I think this is a great example because it illustrates how domain specialization and multimodality truly do go hand in hand to solve some pretty industry-specific problems. So the last emerging technology is agentic AI. And I've got to say, Gartner takes hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of calls on this topic. And we have observed a massive amount of agent washing, where virtually every product, regardless of its underlying capabilities, is being labeled as agentic, which raises the very relevant question, what exactly is agentic AI? Well, it has 6 primary characteristics. It can be a single or a multi-agent system capable of making context-based decisions. It can adapt its goals and reason through problems. It has variable levels of autonomy ranging from fully autonomous to semi-autonomous. And it is collaborative, meaning it can interact with and work with other agents. And agentic AI represents a significant evolution in automation that's going to unlock some pretty impactful use cases. So let's take a look at one such example. Now here we have an Australian water utility that is piloting the use of a multi-agent solution for remote infrastructure management. And they're using XM Pro's fully autonomous, collaborative, multi-agent architecture to run this facility. And there's 3 primary agents at play here. There's a reservoir ops agent, which is in charge of maintaining water at a certain level. There is an energy efficiency agent, which predicts when is it actually most cost-effective to pump water. And then, lastly, there's the maintenance agent, which is in charge of monitoring various assets, primarily pumps, to determine when does preventative maintenance need to be performed. And what's interesting is not only are these agents fully autonomous, but they are actually collaborative, and they have competing objectives that require them to work together in order to meet an ultimate goal. And I think this is a great example because it illustrates the art of the possible with agentic AI and the kinds of new use case opportunities and new automation that agentic AI will unlock. So this brings us back to the original question, where will generative AI soon work? Well, you need to plan for an explosion of domain-specialized offerings. You need to plan for multimodality becoming a standard capability. And you need to plan for the future of automation becoming agentic. And if you effectively plan for this automation, you're going to be able to capitalize on the new opportunities that generative AI represents for your organization. All right, the last section. Now that we know where generative AI will soon work, let's consider where it might never work. And in this section, we're looking at the three primary challenges that are inhibiting GenAI adoption, which are market, business, and tech challenges. So first up, we've got market challenges. Now, at the beginning of this presentation, I held up this old flip phone back from the early 2000 era. And as you all probably recall, it could be an absolute nightmare trying to find a charger that would actually fit your phone. Well, nowadays, most phone chargers are standardized onto USB-C. And we're having a similar issue now with generative AI, where lack of standardization is actually inhibiting some important GenAI functionality. And in a hyper-autonomous future, we need AI systems to be able to interact with other AI systems. And this is going to facilitate agent-to-agent communication. This is going to allow those domain-specialized offerings I was talking about earlier interact with your more general-purpose solutions. So it's an incredibly important technology. And in the past couple months alone, I've probably had a dozen vendors bring up this very issue in our calls. And only 2 weeks ago, there was a new protocol that was launched to help address this very issue. So it's a very relevant, very emerging challenge that you all need to be aware of, as it's going to impact the performance of your generative AI, particularly your agentic AI applications. Next, we have business challenges. And one of the top challenges is that the main use cases of generative AI are actually struggling to drive adoption. Now, the top use cases today, as we were discussing earlier, are delivering medium value. However, many organizations actually struggle to provide tangible outcomes. And this is translating into lower generative AI adoption rates. And if the market is actually going to get from 15% to 95% adoption, this is going to require vendors doing a better job at demonstrating GenAI value. Now, the second business challenge is that some of the more higher risk applications may not even emerge. And one of the initial findings of our agentic AI research here at Gartner is that organizations like yourselves are not looking for the most innovative or for the most autonomous solution in the market. They're looking for automation that they can trust. And it's use cases that successfully strike this balance between trust and automation that are going to be the most successful in the near term. Now, the last challenge is technology-oriented. And this slide considers the use cases where a generative AI first approach will likely fail you. And these are examples where generative AI should probably play a smaller role or require a more hybrid approach to innovation. So, for example, we've got prediction and simulation. Digital twins actually play a pretty key role in these two use cases, as well as using machine learning models to execute tasks based off of the reasoning of a large language model. Now, in cases where you need 99.999% accuracy, you're probably going to want to consider combining your generative AI investments with more classical AI technology. And this could be neurosymbolic AI, it could be machine learning models, or it could simply be rules-based logic. And this will embed a degree of control and explainability and reliability into your generative AI applications. And so this is something that's important to understand, the challenges of a generative AI first or only approach. So be aware of this and try to account for this in your technology investments. All right, the last technology challenge. This considers where agentic AI may not work in the very near term. And I think this is a very relevant question because agentic AI is going to permeate virtually all software. And what you can see on the screen here is that there is a significant gap between low agency and high agency solutions. And what I've done is I've placed stars where we think the market will actually be most receptive to agentic AI in the very near term. So let's run through it. First, we've got static versus adaptive. Now, I've placed a star closer on the lower end of the spectrum because high adaptivity is actually difficult to control. It's not reliable, and we're expecting most near-term use cases to gravitate towards the lower end of the spectrum. Reactive versus proactive. Proactivity is actually pretty desirable, so we place the star closer towards that end. Simple versus complex tasks. Now, simple tasks are less risky. And most organizations today do not feel comfortable using agentic AI to automate more complex goals within their company. However, we do see simple tasks being executed in more complex environments. And we're actually expecting a significant degree of variability here, so we place a star closer towards the center. Supervised versus autonomous. Most organizations today are actually operating on the lower end of this spectrum. And this is because fully autonomous or highly autonomous solutions simply overstep the risk threshold of most companies. And in stepping back and taking a look at this graphic, it's probably best to opt for an agentic AI platform that is flexible and that allows you to maybe start on the lower end of the agency spectrum and meet current requirements within the organization. And as time progresses and as you become more advanced, allows you to scale to more high agency applications in the future. All right, so this brings us back to the original question, where might generative AI never work? Well, there's three main challenges that you need to navigate. First are the market challenges that are inhibiting some important GenAI functionality. The second are the business challenges where lack of value outcomes and trust is actually inhibiting GenAI adoption. And third are the technology challenges where your tech investments might actually be misaligned to your use cases. And simply being aware of these challenges can help you navigate them in the coming years and set yourself up for success. So how can you action some of these insights from today's conversation? Well, the first thing that you can do on Monday morning is sit down with your team and evaluate your current generative AI use cases. And ask yourself the question, are they actually delivering value? Are you seeing a return on your investment? And create a use case roadmap that prioritizes outcomes for your organization. And this is going to help you capitalize on existing market opportunity. Now, the second thing that you can do over the next 3 months is work on striking a balance between trust and risk and feasibility and value in your generative AI applications. You're going to want to work with vendors and technologies that provide automation that you trust, but also are advanced enough to allow you to scale to more complex use cases in the future. And lastly, over the next year, you're going to want to work on investing in innovation opportunities like multimodal capabilities, domain-specialized language models, and agentic AI. These three technologies are critically important in the future success of generative AI use cases, and they represent excellent innovation opportunities for you all. And with that, you're now equipped with the knowledge to be an actor, to be a driver in reimagining the future of AI. Thank you all.